Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to another episode of Perspective. As always, I'm really very happy that you've joined me on the show. We have an amazing guest on a line with us this morning. He is a politician, he's also an author and an activist. He's going to be talking to us lots about his life and what's brought him to this point. He is Ricardo Raaid Maarman. He was born and raised in Raaid. He holds degrees in, he has a BA degree in politics, philosophy and economics. And as I've indicated, he's also a social activist, and he fought a fierce, protracted legal battle against the South African government during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we do know there were lots of theories about this was a man-made virus, and it was totally unnecessary to shut down the entire world. Was it about the big role players? Was it about perhaps resetting? As far as the New World Order is concerned, was the COVID-19 pandemic all about that? Well, we'll hear from Ricardo, but more importantly, we're also going to be talking about his political party. It is called Azania, and what has brought him to this point. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the program, Ricardo Raaid Maarman. What a pleasure to have you on the show this morning.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Julie. Thank you very much for having me on your show. It is a great pleasure and a great honor indeed, and looking forward to our discussions. Thank you very much.
Lovely to have you on the show as well. And I'm just kind of thinking, I had a discussion a little while ago with someone who represents the coloured community in the Western Cape, and he really was very, very upset because he believes that the coloured community are possibly the forgotten community of South Africa. Is that the reason why you've decided to come on board with your party called Azania or Azania?
Yes, of course, the coloured community is a community that has been overlooked. But to be honest with you, so has been much of South Africa's people. You know, the poor people have been overlooked in South Africa. The transition that we hope that would bring the freedom and prosperity that we want to hasn't really delivered. And so, yes, I am here to try and push for that transition to be complete, what I call the peaceful revolution. And I'm doing that, yes, for the forgotten coloured community in South Africa, but also for the forgotten, Xhosa communities and all other communities in this country, because I think their plight is similar, and I think there's only strength in trying to unite them for a common cause.
You've written a book called The Subversion of South Africa, and you had a very glowing foreword by none other than Professor Sipho Siepe. I've talked with him many times on different platforms, a highly respected man, but he's given you a very glowing review and foreword on the book. Let's talk about the book. You talk about the subversion of South Africa. Do you believe that as these elections are going to be playing out, that whatever you talk about in the book, some of the stuff would come to pass? And how worried are you about that particular situation?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Professor Sipho Siepe, I've got great respect for him. You know, one of our foremost academics on the issue of politics, historian, advisor, played many big roles in South African life and politics. So the subversion of South Africa, that is my read of politics in the country. In essence, I believe that the South African public are being deceived, have been deceived. We're not getting the full story of what has happened, and we are not getting the full picture of what is happening to us as we speak. And part of this issue of subversion as well is that, as I've mentioned previously, the transition from colonialism or apartheid to where we are now, this did not happen fully. This did not happen in good faith and truly. And that is why we as South Africans, we are sitting today in poverty, disunited. And this election that is coming up after 30 years, we are not sure, we don't know whether we're coming or going. And many of us are very apprehensive of the future. So this is basically the feeling that the subversion of South Africa, the book that I wrote, is trying to give facts to give analysis to this feeling that we are not quite free, that we're not quite sure what happened in 1994, that we're not quite sure where we're going. We feel we are in the middle of a plot, but whose plot and whose agenda and where are we going? So these are the issues that the subversion of South Africa is trying to answer. And I've did quite a bit of research to find the facts and to find some of the answers to these questions.
It's a very strong title, Subversion of South Africa. It worries one when you look at a title such as that. And I'm kind of wondering what and why should South Africans read this book? Is it going to give us the full picture regarding what's played out since 1994? That also leads me to perhaps make the comment about state capture. That word has been bandied about quite a lot, to the point where we kind of almost tired of hearing state capture. But that is a huge reality as far as we as South Africans are concerned. Regarding the election, state capture and your book, The Subversion of South Africa, do you think the true and the strongest of messages will get through to the people and they'll make the right decision as far as their own lives and the future of South Africa is concerned?
Look, the subversion means the undermining. Okay, so subversion means to undermine a political system. It means to undermine the capacity of power in that system. It means to undermine political authority or the decision making in that system. It means to undermine. And so what I am saying is that yes, South Africa has been undermined, is being undermined, and we need to understand how this is taking place, the forces that are doing this, the objectives that it has. Now, just to give you an idea, you make the example of state capture, or you mentioned state capture. And state capture is quite a good thing to mention in line with subversion. Because as I say, subversion is to undermine. How do you undermine authority? Well, one of the ways in undermining authority is, for example, if I am stopped at the traffic light, a police officer stops me, and he's an authority to keep law and order and to keep our roads safe. But I now offer him a bribe. Obviously, I don't do this. I don't recommend anybody do this. But if someone offers that police officer a bribe, that is an attempt to undermine authority. When the officer accepts the bribe, he's undermined. And now, instead of him being an instrument for law enforcement on the roads, he becomes an instrument for whomever this person is that bribes him. Now, this is what, to give a very crude explanation of subversion in that regard. Now, to take this example further, if you use a situation...
Carry on, please.
Yeah. Sorry. So if you take the example further from the traffic officer, so if now someone is in a position to bribe the very president of the country, and the president accepts the bribe, and then the president listens to that person to conduct state policy, then what you've seen here is, one, you have seen the subversion of the authority of the office of president. And if the president now is completely beholden to that person, the president is captured. And if the president is captured and he delivers the authority that he has over to the person that has captured him, then he has allowed the state to be captured. So this is subversion. And one of the objectives of subversion, or one of the objectives of undermining a country, is to gain control of it by immoral and hidden means. By, for example, bribing a state president. And by doing so, you gain control over the entire country. This is one of the objectives of subversion. And this is maybe a very crude explanation, but it will give the idea of what I mean and what I think is happening in South Africa.
It's not crude at all. Let me correct you and say it's perhaps basic, but not crude at all. We have a minute to go before we take our first ad break, but when we come back, I want to talk about the issue around Show Me the Virus. You were a very, very strong activist regarding that issue. So what came first? Was it the lockdown? And people like yourself, you're not a singular voice as far as that issue is concerned. There were lots of activists all around the world talking about the COVID conspiracy theory. Did the COVID conspiracy theory come about first in your life and then the book, or was it the book and then the theory? All of that and more coming up right after our ad break. I'm talking with politician Ricardo Raaid Maarman, and he hails from Raaid. He is here to represent his party in the upcoming elections. Welcome back. This is Perspective. My guest is Ricardo Raaid Maarman. He is a politician, he's also an author, and he's here to talk about the upcoming elections. And of course, the book he's written, and we're going to ask him where about and how did the legal battle end against the South African government show us the virus, that a theory that was going all around the world. Lots of people were pro the virus and lots of people were against the virus. Welcome back, Ricardo. Your thoughts on those statements?
Thank you very much, Julie. Appreciate that. I want to, on the theme here of subversion, as I've now given the, thank you for much better word, a basic explanation of what subversion is. Now, if you take it further, so what is this? It's always when you want to undermine or hijack political power specifically. So when you see there is something happening, a very big issue happening, and the evidence of it is not clear, there's a lot of controversy, but the consequences of it is that it moves political power in one direction or the other, or it moves financial power in one direction or the other, then one can suspect that there is possibly subversion. You'll have to investigate it further. But let's look now at the issue of the virus, and viruses. And especially in South Africa, we have had a long history of this. And you mentioned earlier on the colored community. Of course, broader than that is the Khoi and San communities, etc. And they have a history with viruses. You see the San community and the Khoi community in the Cape, they were almost wiped off the face of the earth through what they said was the smallpox virus. But the smallpox virus and the outbreak in the Cape, there was many things that were suspicious. I studied it very closely, and it was one of the reasons that I was suspicious of the COVID-19 pandemic or virus that started. Because in that one in the Cape, they said there was a smallpox outbreak. What was the cause of it? Dirty blankets. Can you believe it? Dirty blankets. And it was because the Khoi people, that was said that they were not used to the viruses or whatever of the British people that came. And so that, when they came into contact, they became sick and died. And at the same time, the Dutch was administering vaccinations to them. And so this caused, there was a few outbreaks in the Cape, and it caused the people to die, the Khoi community to die in droves, and they were almost wiped out. And this caused a shift in political power. Before, they used to be able to resist the colonial effort against them because of their numbers, but these pandemics weakened them, and of course the colonial project in the Cape was very successful. And then we move forward, we also see now the HIV amongst the Zulu population in South Africa as well. Our biggest population in the country, you destabilize them, it has political consequences as well in the country. So when I looked at all of these carefully, and the same COVID-19, the issue that I found out, Julie, was that there was no proof that the virus actually existed. Besides the fact that it has political consequences, one, because someone is having the power to impose a lockdown, reduce rules, etc. It has economic consequences. Some businesses are allowed to open and some are not allowed to open, and this has huge consequences of economic power. And of course, those who produce the medicine supposedly for this, they make huge profits on this as well. But scientifically, Julie, I've said a lot, but just scientifically speaking, there's never been an autopsy or any such objective evidence that the virus does exist, the COVID-19 virus or the smallpox or the HIV. Two, that the treatment that they prescribe, matches this virus and can deal with it. These things have never been proven scientifically. I've gone to court and fought a 2-year plus battle in court, asking a simple question: show us the virus, in which I've asked the court to force the government to provide scientific proof that the virus exists instead of just anecdotal proof. Because again, the warning comes, as a Muslim, the warning comes from the Quran, that when someone comes, I think it's in Surah Hujarat, when someone comes and they say, make a public statement that everybody should act this way or the other, and this statement is made by someone who has a history of not being honest or being immoral, etc., then we should question, we should ask for evidence, lest we act in a way that could be harmful to ourselves and others without knowing what we are doing.
Frightening indeed. I now was one of those people who absolutely insisted that my family take the vaccines at that time. But sadly, one of my own nephews, 32-year-old man, young man at the prime of his life, contracted the virus, supposedly, was in hospital for about 32 days and then died. You indicated, Ricardo, that you fought a long, hard battle against the government under the banner "Show us the virus." What was the end result of that court case? And I come back to my previous question. Were you involved in this battle with the government, "Show us the virus"? And then, of course, you've also authored a book. Which came first? How did each action at that point in your life really influence what followed and where you are at in your life right now?
Thank you very much for that, Julie. I want to say, obviously, my sincere condolences to your nephew that has sadly passed away.
Thank you.
And of course to yourself as well, that, look, we were deceived here. This is what the idea of subversion is. There are people, like, for example, the traffic officer. I'm supposed to trust him. He's supposed to be in a normal society. I'm supposed to trust him. There's nothing wrong with that. And he's supposed to follow the law. But when he becomes corrupt, then this is a problem. When authority is corrupted, then it becomes a problem. Those who trust authority then are facing the situation where they could be led astray, and this could have huge consequences. The bigger this authority is, the greater the consequences on loss of life, loss of property, etc. Which came first? My fight against the government for the show us the virus issue, that came first. That fight, unfortunately, exposed to me the possibility that we could deal here with subversion, that we could deal here with influences that over our government that are not always moral and that are not legitimate, that are not open and upfront, and that does not serve the best interest of the people of South Africa. My fight against the government brought this to the fore, unfortunately. And where did the fight end up? Well, the fight ended up, so I went to court. Just want to give you 1 minute explanation. I went to court and I said to the court, we have never seen an autopsy where the virus has been removed from someone's body, proven to exist, proven that it was the cause of death. No autopsy of this has been shown. Normally, when we want to prove death, we do this via an autopsy. So I asked the High Court, please force the government to do an autopsy, or to show us an autopsy of the many people that have passed away, and that could be a justification of what they are doing, all the rights they are taking away from people, and all the pressure they are putting on people, and all the money they are spending on taxpayers' money on this thing. Do that. And unfortunately, this, as I said, went all the way to the Constitutional Court, but in the High Court dismissed my case. The High Court judge said this was not a matter of public interest. It's not necessary for the public to gain this kind of information. And secondly, because it's not a matter of public interest, that I must be penalized for this. And so I was penalized that I had to pay the legal fees of President Ramaphosa. I had to pay his legal fees, and the judge said that's the end of the matter. I must be punished. I must not bring this matter to court anymore. And so that is where the matter ended, Julie. And that it caused me to say, look, I can't. This matter can't be solved in the courts anymore, because this is unbelievable that the judge could say that for us not getting to the bottom of this issue is not a matter of public interest. And two, for me asking this question, that I should be punished for it. And so that told me there's something very wrong with our system. And that brought me to write the book, Subversion of South Africa. Because now I realize to get justice, I have to appeal to the court of public opinion. I have to appeal to the public, because it is the public that suffers the worst risk in a case when their government and their system has indeed been subverted. Thank you, Julie.
You're not a lone voice as far as Show Me the Virus is concerned, or Show Us the Virus is concerned. There are very many voices all around the world that raised the issue back in the day when this was happening. I'm so sorry that you had to suffer financial and undoubtedly emotional stress and trauma regarding this matter. We have 2 minutes to go before we go for our next ad break. Did this situation then spur you on to write the book? And whilst you were writing the book, did you say to yourself, I need to take on the system and I need to enter politics to make a meaningful difference? A short answer, and then we're going to more detail right after the ad break.
Exactly, Julie. That is exactly how it went. When I realized now that we are dealing with a systemic problem, that is no more that, you see, I was faced with a situation where the academics, the courts, the politics, everybody was in unison, against the interest of the people of South Africa. And I could find in no one a reasonable person to give me a hearing and for us to go to the facts. And so I realized the only door open was for me to stand up again and try to mobilize the people, for them to realize there's something very, very wrong in South Africa.
Let's go for that ad break. We'll be back and talk some more with Ricardo Maarman. This hour is clearly not enough time to unpack everything that we want to unpack, but hopefully we will talk with him again in the future. Let's go for that ad break, and when we get back, talk more to this upcoming politician of Azania. He, of course, is Ricardo Raaid Maarman. Welcome back. I'm talking with Ricardo Raaid Maarman. He has just entered the political arena. He's going to tell us more about that in a minute or two. But firstly, let's talk about his reversion to Islam. What was it that brought him to Islam, and how is Islam shaping his immediate and future aspirations, not only in the political arena, but for the betterment of all of the people of South Africa? Welcome back, Ricardo.
Thank you very much, Julie, for that very important question. My reversion to Islam, Julie, is my search for truth. I'm a person that, searches for the truth. I do not like to live, with uncertainty and not knowing things. And so the same is when it comes to my, religious convictions. This is what I did, search out for the truth. And one of my searches led me to reading the Quran, and even reading the Quran purely in translation, which was, obviously it's very good, but, there's more depth to it. But coming at that stage in contact with the Quran, I found it to be truth from the Almighty. And at that stage, I was, of course, a Christian coming from a small town, from the Dutch Reformed Church. That's what I was in. My mother, taught me to be a good Christian. But when I read the Quran, I realized it's the truth. And when I get the truth, what I do is I accept it. I never deny the truth. And so I had to do the painful thing to go to my mother and said to her, Mom, I have found the truth, and it is in Islam. And of course, my mom was not very happy with this, but I had to stand for it. And how did that, inspire the rest of my life? When I realized that there's no virus, they have no proof of it, whether it was popular or not, I stood for it. And at the moment as well, I believe that the South African society, we are being taken for a ride. I believe it's possible that our entire system is being subverted. This is not a popular thing, but I believe it's the truth. This is where my search has led me to. And so there's how I connect these things.
Alhamdulillah. And I hope that you've been welcomed with open arms by the entire Muslim community of South Africa as our new brother in Islam. How long is it that you have been a Muslim?
This has been quite some time. It's now been about 20 years or so. And yes, the Muslim community, I've learned a lot. I've been, richly welcomed within the Muslim community. I've met a lot of people that are very good people. You could see that the truth of the faith of Islam has entered deep into the hearts of many. Muslims are doing great work in trying to improve the situation in South Africa. And this is part of the reason that I am very concerned now about the future of the Muslim community in South Africa, that I believe that their religious freedoms might be under threat in this country. And it's particularly connected to the current genocide of the innocent Palestinians that are taking place, and the activism of the Muslim community to stand up for that, as we've seen a crackdown that happened against them in Cape Town just a short while before the election.
So let's talk about, there's been a lot of concern around funding of political parties, and parties accusing each other about who's being funded by whom, who their bosses are, and they eventually are going to have to bow down to the people that have funded them. They will obviously call the tune, and they will then have to just play along with them, otherwise the funding gets pulled back. So who's funding your party, Azania? And what is your manifesto? And how confident are you that you are going to make a dent and you're going to be, inshallah, a force to be reckoned with regarding the political scenario here in South Africa?
Well, regarding the funding, so Azania is funded by our members. We get donations here and there. As people could see, unfortunately not very significant because of the stance that we are taking. So you don't see our posters and things like that everywhere. You do not see me on national TV all the time. And unfortunately, this is a reflection of poor funding on our side. But of course, there are vested interests, and the vested interests in the country, the ones who do have the finance, they have, many of them are invested in the current dire circumstances in South Africa. And so that shows that if they would have invested in me, that I would undo these dire circumstances and they might not have profited from them. And that is the reason why I do not have such significant finance at the moment. In terms of our manifesto, there's many things I can highlight to you, but the fundamental point that we are saying in the manifesto is South Africa is a country that is faced with systemic problems. And it's very difficult to solve these problems without dealing with the system, especially if you do not have power. So, for example, when it comes to the economy, South Africa has a currency called the Rand. The Rand is fully controlled by the South African Reserve Bank. The South African Reserve Bank is a private entity that is not in the control of the government. And so it's very difficult for the government to execute its economic policy or any other policy when the Reserve Bank can change the value of the Rand at any time, when the Reserve Bank can change the interest rates at any time, and all of this would have economic consequences on everybody. And so this is hamstrings the government. So we believe that the economic system in this regard should be changed. Secondly, South Africa is a highly monopolized economy. The private monopoly is operating. And therefore, if these private monopolies decide that they are not going to invest in the economy, they are not going to hire people, they are not going to build further factories, etc., and then there's very little the government can do as far as economic, employment is concerned, etc. So these are the issues in South Africa, and these are the issues that that Azania's manifesto seeks to address. And the issue is that South Africa needs a peaceful revolution, and we need to peacefully, fundamentally change the system. Because as it is now, we are wasting time. People will realize years from now that very little will change if we keep the system as it is. Just like they've realized now, 30 years after ANC government, very little change because the ANC was quite frankly not really in charge of the country. Many important factors were outside and is still outside their control.
How do you explain a peaceful revolution? The moment you articulate the word revolution, what comes to my mind is a bloodbath. Can we have a peaceful revolution? Is there such a thing as a peaceful revolution?
Yes, certainly. Again, where do I get the idea of peaceful revolution from? I got it from the Quran. So the Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains that a situation of a people will never change until they change themselves. So the first part of a peaceful revolution is you need to change yourself. Your society can't change until you change your morals, until you change your belief system, until you change your knowledge, until you change your way of thinking. These things cannot be done violently, unfortunately. This can only be done peacefully, for you to find a new conviction, to find a new behavior, all of these things. And nothing outside will change unless these things change first. And so a revolution just merely means a fundamental shift or change in the power structure or the structure or the functioning of a society. It does not have to be violent. Sometimes people resort to the violence. And violence cannot be the way in which the revolution can be successful. Because you can be violent, and after the violence ceases, the people's behavior comes back again, their thinking comes back again, their knowledge stays the same, their belief system stays the same. Whatever you did with that violence before, it will revert back to it again. Because people are how they believe, how they think, and how they behave eventually. So yes, I truly believe that the revolution should be peaceful and can be peaceful.
And alhamdulillah, as you've rightly quoted from the Holy Quran, a people's condition will not change unless they change themselves. So, and only then will they see the change around them. I want to talk about a few things that we touched on earlier on in the show, and I'd like you to expand. You spoke about colonialism, you spoke about the Dutch and the British bringing in viruses and almost having wiped out the Khoi and the San people of South Africa. We also know that back in the day, brown people and black people were subjugated by the white people through the DOP system. And that was very prevalent and probably is still prevalent in your part of the world, Graaff-Reinet and surroundings, how that has crippled an entire nation or population. So going forward, are those the type of issues you're going to be talking about and driving for change? Let's also talk about, you spoke about the South African Reserve Bank. We know that that possibly is also tied in with the New World Order philosophy. And all of this is definitely interconnected. So you and all other political parties, depending what their agenda and their manifestos are all about, have a huge task ahead of you. So I'm going to leave you to mull over that. Let's go for our final ad break. And when we come back in the next 12 hours, 12 minutes, there's lots to cram in before we wrap up the show this morning. And welcome back. Ricardo Maarman is my guest. He represents the Azania Party. He's here to talk politics and how he sees the elections playing out. We've touched on a lot of issues this morning, and I'm going to ask him to talk to us about the DOP system, how government has subjugated a certain group of people in the days of colonialism, and I think that is still happening in certain parts of the country. The New World Order, how Zionism has such a firm grip on South Africa, the South African Reserve Bank, which Ricardo touched on a minute or two. And we've also heard about foreign entities. We've heard about America funding certain parties here to have a bigger say in the governing of South Africa. Back to you, Ricardo. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Thank you very much, Julie. So the first is, that yes, the DOP system was definitely used to try, and this was to try and get especially the Khoi and colored people and the brown people, if you want to say, to get them disrupted, corrupted through alcohol. Now, this is the technique of subversion as well. So subversion is to subjugate or to destroy through corrupting something. And so the colored and the brown people have been corrupted through the DOP system, encouraging them to drink alcohol, etc. This is still happening. I'm sure we've heard many times, or we've observed, if you go into any of the colored communities, and now it has spread to all communities, you find more shebeens and shebeens that you would find factories. You find more shebeens that you would find places of worship. You find more shebeens that you would find places to drink alcohol, then you would find libraries. So this is an attempt to subvert and to destroy these communities. And the issue of drugs and gangsterism is the same. These are what I would call as well, that this is state-sponsored terrorism and subjugation of the people. Because organized crime and gangsterism in the colored community is another way in which this is done. And I would here like to warn, all people from these areas that are faced with this is a systemic problem. It cannot be solved just in your community. There are big systems, national systems, international systems that are at play to try and disrupt and destroy your people. The only way we stop this is we have to be aware of it, and we have to encourage a peaceful revolution. Our people have to understand that internally they have to stop the temptation of consuming alcohol. They should not allow themselves to be corrupted like this. And then secondly, we should then change our community by removing these things out of our community. And that is how I advocate peaceful revolution as far as that is concerned. Another way as well, we must understand the public healthcare system has also been used against our people. Again, if we go back to Cape Town, and our people were routinely experimented on. During apartheid, there was medical experiments, etc., that was being conducted on the colored people of Cape Town. And much of these experiments were not necessarily to see how they can improve their health, but some of it was just to harm them, to destroy them. But we were the subject of medical experimentation. So the public healthcare system was used against us. I don't think that has stopped, because you must understand, there is always this program in the public healthcare system. They want to help our girls, prevent teenage pregnancy. They want to help our people with this and the other, etc. But they keep our people in the state of abject poverty. They are not willing to move heaven and earth to help them out of the poverty. And we have a history where we have seen people doing medical experiments on our people, trying to destroy them. So again, here I warn our people to be aware of this, to be careful, to understand that the system is not always there to be kind to you. And then, Julie, you mentioned the issue of the Reserve Bank. So the Reserve Bank, it's difficult, I'm speaking to an audience of Muslims, so this is easier. But the Reserve Bank is at the center of a system of usury, riba. And riba, the purpose of usury and riba is a system of economic warfare, but also a system of broader warfare against the people. That is why in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet, peace be upon him, has declared war against the usurer. Because usury is a form of warfare against the people and against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And unfortunately, maybe to end it there, that the usury, the ones who are really, driving it and being in charge of it are usually the Zionists, and because it's the main source of their finance to control all other aspects of our lives, specifically the political system.
And obviously it's a means of severe subjugation on the poorest of the poor. The issue around foreign interests and investment in the current elections, investing in certain political parties because they know that it will be time to pay back. And payback time, they expect huge dividends. How do you see that situation playing out? Because it's a reality.
Yes, Julie, it's a very big problem. That's one of the issues that I've raised. I don't know if you're aware, but as Azania, our participation in the elections have been curtailed. The IEC has not allowed us to participate nationally.
Yes.
And so one of the things that I have done, and I'll maybe explain that if I have time, I have endorsed Al-Jama'ah. I have said to, especially in the Muslim community, that they should band together and vote Al-Jama'ah to protect their religious freedom, because I believe that the Muslim community in particular have serious problems on the horizon for them. And one of the ways in which they can defend themselves is to have a big block of votes, maybe 10 seats or so in parliament, that that will speak and represent this issue. And maybe just to highlight this issue briefly, you see there are now calls being made in America, in the United States Congress, that South Africa should be sanctioned, economic sanctions should be issued against South Africa because the ANC took the ICJ case, for the genocide being committed against the Palestinian people. If those sanctions of America is being issued against South Africans are successful, it will be very difficult for the people of South Africa that are already suffering. And we've already heard, some senior people, Zionists speaking out that the Muslim community should be blamed for such a thing when it happens, that the Muslim community has undue influence over the ANC, and that the Muslim community has got too much power in the country and they need to be dealt with. So we are being set up for a trap here, for persecution that will come, and we need to be careful about it. We need to remember the crackdown that happened in Cape Town. And the only way to stop this is to be together. And my simple advice to the Muslim community in this regard is vote for one party, Al-Jama'ah, I would say in this instance. Urge the Muslim political leaders to stand together. And I'm not just saying vote Al-Jama'ah out of the blue. I've engaged with all of the political leaders, the Muslim political leaders, or the ones that I know of, and say, there's danger coming here. You have to stand together. It makes no sense not standing together in the face of such a real threat. And if you think the Zionists are playing, look what's happening in Rafah and in Gaza at the moment. So stand together. And Al-Jama'ah responded and accepted my call, and that is why I have endorsed them. Coming back to the issue, as you say, foreign interference in the election, yes, my party has been limited in our capacity to participate in the elections by the IEC. There are several other parties that are currently in court fighting this very issue, all the way to the Constitutional Court. Many Zionist billionaires, have funded the political parties here. The DA traveled to the United States of America just before the elections, seeking some support or something like that, I guess. And then most recently, the IEC chief electoral officer has met with the American ambassador to South Africa barely a month before the elections. Now, these things are highly irregular. Why? Because we are going into a very important elections, and South Africa is a very rich and important country. And there are people who do not have the best intentions for us, are doing all they can to ensure that a result will favor them at the end of this election.
So we do have two other Muslim political parties as well. What would your advice be to them? Because you've spoken about Al-Jama'ah, and my producers just told me we have 2 minutes to wrap up. So very, very quickly, let's then rather talk about post the elections. What do you believe is going to play out? Are you confident? And we also know that coalitions are on the horizon as well. Is that going to dilute the power of what the people are wanting in the country post the elections?
I think post the elections, it's very likely that the ANC will lose its majority, and that will have huge consequences for our foreign policy and our domestic policy. For example, at the moment, our domestic and foreign policy is, to oppose the atrocities of the apartheid state of Israel. I believe if the ANC loses power, this will shift. I believe the ANC will lose power. It's very difficult for them not to, because of how they've governed and their relationship with the people. I would encourage the Muslims not to vote for the ANC, because I think that is just going to be a lost cause. You will not be able to stop them from losing power, and the ANC will not be able to prioritize and to stop the persecution that's coming against you. You must remember, it was the national police that was persecuting you in Cape Town, along with the metro police of the DA. So be careful of that. Beware. Do not trust the ANC as far as that is concerned. Secondly, I would say yes, possibly coalition governments are coming. We must be careful of this. It's not an ideal situation. Coalition governments is a precursor to chaos, and that chaos is a precursor to a more tyrannical government. And you're right that part of the New World Order, as you mentioned, that's the idea for them to have coalitions first, to justify dictatorships, and then to link these dictatorships around the world into some form of one world government. I don't think much will change for the people of South Africa after the election. I think they will be very disillusioned afterwards. Load shedding and all of those things will continue. And I would like the South African people just to remember one thing. The only solution here is a peaceful revolution. We can't just try to plaster over the cracks of a system as it is now. The system needs fundamental change. And people will realize after the elections that whatever outcome there is going to be is simply not going to be enough until, one, we as a people change how we think, how we believe, and how we behave, and we change the system outside fundamentally. If we don't do that, nothing much will change.
Ricardo, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. Shukran for your deep insights. We wish you very, very well in the upcoming elections, and we're going to be looking out for you and the changes you make in the areas that you are representing. Lots of du'as, and you go well. Assalamu alaikum, and thank you once again for being on the show this morning.
Thank you very much. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to yourself and to your audience. Thank you very much.
And that's where we leave it. A very interesting discussion with Ricardo, Raaid, Maarman. We wrap up now. Thank you to the studio crew for all their hard work behind the scenes. From me till next week at the same time, as always, Assalamu alaikum and Khuda Hafiz.